Emily, what's on your radar?
Well, I did two back-to-back interviews for Federalist Radio Hour on Wednesday. One was with Elbridge Colby, who's a China expert, and the other was with Tristan Harris on social media. Harris, a lot of people probably remember from the Netflix film The Social Dilemma. Now, Colby in the first podcast told me the threat of a war over Taiwan is more grave than we're prepared to admit. Harris, then in the second podcast, which I taped right afterwards, put into stark reality the incredible control China has over the American public. And I've been thinking a lot about that this week. Just last week, a Pew survey actually found nearly 70% of teens use TikTok, but they're a minority of the app's projected 85 million users by the end of the year. So Colby fleshed out why, as he wrote in Foreign Affairs recently, quote, a war with China over Taiwan has gone from what many regarded as a remote scenario to a fearfully plausible one. So set aside for a moment whether or not you think the intelligence community and the military-industrial complex are intentionally fanning the flames of conflict, as they always do. Colby is just merely observing the state of play, and it's urgent. All the bluster over Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan underscored the fragility of the relationship between these nuclear powers, just as the reckless warmongering over Ukraine has done all year. So what does this have to do with social media? For all the talk about TikTok's data problems, which are very real and very serious, it's essential to consider these 2 points. First, as Colby said, our relationship with China is fragile. And second, that China currently controls the most popular social network in America. We've talked about this before here, but Harris said it again in our conversation this week. Quote, TikTok has basically become the #1 social media app around the world. Would you have allowed the Soviet Union during the Cold War to basically control television programming for all Western democracies and pick what they see and they don't see? I mean, it is absolutely insane that we've allowed this to happen, he told me. So think about that. If TikTok was not owned by a Chinese company, which despite all their claims ultimately means a hostile foreign power could quietly be exercising control over the flow of information, even if that weren't the case, the app would still be a national security threat and a public health emergency. Like Facebook and Instagram and even Gmail, these products are engaged in what Harris calls, quote, a race to the bottom of the brainstem, profiting off our attention, which leads them to employ unethical business models. Those business models, based innocuously on engagement, mean the more time we spend on their apps, the more money they make, which means they create slot machine-style interfaces onto which we've transferred vast swaths of our personal, professional, and political lives. So to Tristan's point, it's actually much worse than giving the Cold War-era Soviet Union control over, say, NBC, letting them write Johnny Carson's monologues and the Today Show and Facts of Life. Networks use all kinds of tricks, of course, to keep us glued to the screen, like cliffhangers and flashy graphics, but they don't control the flow of information between personal relationships and professional work, like smartphones loaded with social media apps do. We sleepwalked straight into something completely unprecedented in the course of human history, and we have not quite awoken to the reality. Harris put it well in our conversation. Quote, for most people, they think about TikTok, they've heard in the news about the US government's concerns about data, and they're going to basically siphon up all this data on Americans. That's true, but, he added, I'm even more worried about them being able to basically remotely influence basically the next president of the United States. They can say, yeah, we want it to be this person. They can look at all the voting districts in the swing states, and they can say per zip code. I can basically look at people's sentiments with an AI that calculates what people's opinions are in all the key voting areas, and then I can strategically upregulate everybody who starts to say, you know, China's really not so bad. He added, quote, if China were to invade Taiwan tomorrow, they could upregulate all the American voices who are saying that Taiwan was always a part of China. Okay, so just this week, in fact, think about this. TikTok launched an election center that does exactly what Harris was saying. It will, quote, allow users to access state-by-state election information, including details on how to register to vote, how to vote by mail, how to find your polling place, and more, according to TechCrunch. Now, of course, TikTok is also bragging about its plans to control misinformation, you'll be shocked to learn, ahead of the midterms. How dumb can we possibly be? This is a massive data suck on incredibly detailed voter information that can then be used to make their AI even more powerful and more targeted as an influence operation. But the clapping seals in American media are so blinded by their vapid worldviews, they're taking the bait because it gives elites more control over the unwashed masses who need to be handheld in order to avoid electing, another populist candidate. What's even worse is that reputable American institutions are helping TikTok in this obvious data suck that, again, will be available to a hostile foreign power no matter what they say. It's a simple matter of Chinese law. So according to TechCrunch, groups like the National Association of Secretaries of State and Ballotpedia partnered with TikTok on this project. Senator Marco Rubio ran an ad against his Democratic opponent Val Demings recently that was mocked a bit by the chattering class in D.C. The ad hammered Demings simply for being on TikTok. Now, I think his point is correct. No campaign should give their data to this company, and no campaign should be complicit in what this product is doing to developing American brains. But I do have to agree that I'm not sure the attack is that effective. Why? Well, just this week, John Fetterman, who I think is the single best candidate Democrats fielded this cycle, joined TikTok.
Hey everyone, it's John Fetterman, candidate for the U.S. Senate here in Pennsylvania. Definitely Pennsylvania. I'm on TikTok now. Woohoo! Give us a follow here now, and thank you so much for your support.
Ha ha! Well, nothing, of course, could be worse than the ridiculous video Dr. Oz posted this week lamenting inflation's effect on the price of his coup d'etat, which I didn't even know what it was. I had to look it up. But in a sane world, participation in a hostile foreign power's massive and transparent influence operation would be a huge campaign vulnerability. Even in a swing state, though, like Pennsylvania, clearly it's not. That's what scares me much, much more than TikTok. Our collective shrug. We need to disentangle our personal, professional, and political lives and the combination and overlaps between all of those from these damn slot machines. But we're too addicted to them to even realize that. Ryan, the Election Center post on TikTok's website about how they're working with Ballotpedia and the National Association of Secretaries of State is incredible to me. And then it's incredible that you have candidates getting onto TikTok and it's not even a campaign vulnerability. It's something that they're actually excited to roll out because voters haven't turned against this insane, this insanely, I think, dangerous product. It's just crazy to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and the Trump administration made an effort to crack down on TikTok and to kind of force a divestment so that it would be in control of the U.S. investors. That kind of fizzled out. It went partway there, but as you talk about, it didn't completely work. But I think you're right. I think TikTok it's extremely dangerous to allow any foreign government to have that much influence over the public opinion of your populace, and I think you have to shut it down. And if they want to reopen it some way, owned by kind of American investors and subject to American regulations, okay, fine. I'd be fine with shutting it down and leaving it shut down. I think probably half the users would be absolutely, they'd be outraged for a couple of days, and then they'd be like, you know what, I actually feel a lot better after. Maybe it would take like a 30-day detox, and then they would feel better. But your point is a critical one. That say, if there is an invasion of Taiwan, China can instantly put its thumb on the scale of how the American public thinks about that. If it has particular candidates that it likes in either the presidential, Senate, or House, even local races, it can just pump content to those voters that is favorable or oppositional to them. And it doesn't even have to be remotely true. Like the way that TikTok's algorithm works, that things can spread, so quickly that reputations can be destroyed within a 24-hour period before anybody has had a chance to fact check anything. There have been lots of instances of companies, for instance, that have been subject of just straight up misinformation. I think there was I think it was a Black-owned either clothing or beauty company where within 24 hours, this completely incorrect post from somebody who had no authority on the subject, had no claim to any accurate information, just claimed, hey, this is no longer an organic company. This is no longer a Black-owned company. it had like 10 million views on TikTok within 24 hours. It did lasting, perhaps reparable, perhaps not reparable damage to this company. And none of it was true, like just completely made up. And so if you think about that and applied on a mass political scale, the consequences are frightening.
Yeah, and these products, by the way, don't just affect us while we're using them. They affect us in between because they affect the way our brain thinks about different things. And the way that I've had to like explain it to people younger is that like at any given moment, the best news of your life or the worst news of your life is a glance at your phone away, right? So like any moment you're not looking at your phone, you're incredibly like you want to be looking at your phone because anything could happen and you would probably hear about it right here. It's different than even the pagers and the beepers. So we should be realizing like it should be a vulnerability to be inviting this poison into people's lives more and more, whether or not it's owned by a hostile foreign power. But in this case, it's completely insane. Like they are trying to get granular election level detail. And as Tristan told me, like they can just upregulate things to drive voters in one way or the other, or to misinform voters in one way or the other. And it could literally happen tomorrow. That's how fragile our relationship is with China. And we would have like a massive influence operation. They would have huge control over popular opinion in the public. Sarah Fisher reported this week that Oracle is now vetting TikTok's algorithms. So Oracle will have visibility into how TikTok's algorithms surface content to ensure that outcomes are in line with expectations and that the models have not been manipulated in any way. That's from a spokesperson at Oracle to Axios. But that still involves a huge amount of trust that TikTok is giving Oracle all of the information that it needs, and that vetting process is entirely transparent and useful. So it's just impossible like incredible to see the way that institutions and candidates are happily like jumping on the TikTok bandwagon, despite all of these obvious problems.
Yeah, and while I think it should be shut down, I'm also somebody who has more of a systemic approach. I think government intervention here is the only solution. I think kind of shaming candidates into not joining the platform is not going to be effective. Now, if it's effective at raising public consciousness that then gets some government intervention, I could see that. But it doesn't feel to me like a long-term solution there. That whether the Fetterman campaign's on TikTok or not isn't gonna change the power ultimately. Although it is people like Fetterman, if they get elected Senate, who are going to have to be the ones who will vote to like shut this thing down. So I can see it kind of from both directions there.
No, totally. I think you're right. It's just a matter of like it's not like Rubio's ad is not, I don't think, super effective on Demings because a lot of his voters are probably on TikTok and probably don't have like it's just not something that we're aware of to the extent that we should be yet. And so ideally, if the public had, I think, enough information about TikTok, it would be a vulnerability. It would be something you could run an attack at, but it's just not right now, and it might even backfire because a lot of the constituents are there. But.
Right, make you look like a boomer.
right. Oh man. Well, we will be back with more Rising right after this.